Raise your hand if you've ever been busy. Raise your hand if you've ever got tired and feel like you just need a couple days off. Most people would have both hands up right now. That's our world, fast-paced and income-driven. That's why we get caught up in our own lives so often, and that's why it's understandable when most people don't focus on worries that aren't their own. So what makes someone become a humanitarian? Someone whose whole life focuses on the welfare of other humans.
When you go back and you see kids that were living on the streets, kids had no structure, they had no routine, people who had nothing, they didn't have meals. When you see that all of a sudden they're waking up, they have structure, they have something to do, they have a meal in their belly, their life changes completely. They, like I said, their self-esteem changes, their self-worth, their ability to know who they are in the world and what they have the potential of becoming, to give that hope, to give that dream, and then to watch people actually use that to do good for themselves and others it's amazing. It becomes an addiction.
And with Serena's help, we'll find the meaning of life to a humanitarian.
Good morning. Bonjour. Comment ça va? Ça va? Et toi? Ça va très bien. Ni hao. Hola. Ohio. Buongiorno, signore. Bienvenue. One ying. Bienvenidos. Benvenuta. And welcome. Welcome to another exciting episode of Gem Hunter Stories. My name is Barry B. Mixon, and I am a gemological storyteller. And each week, I get to come into your home or wherever you are and tell you a story about places you've never been before, things and stories you've never heard before. Each week, I get the magnificent opportunity to take you on a mental, physical, and spiritual adventure into the art, science, history, and magic of gemstones, precious metals, and fine jewelry. And I do it because I use it as a template. I use it as a starting place. I use it as an inception point to get people to begin to understand and discover the value of your own stories. I'm so excited about doing this show today because this is actually a story that I've never told before. Maybe to individuals, but never told publicly. So I wanted to, first of all, welcome the students, some of my students who are here watching, some of my staff, maybe even Dr. Booker is here. Welcome. You hear in the news, I was going to do a different show because this is pearls and people born in June. I have not forgotten about you. You know how I feel about pearls. But because of all the things you hear in the news as of late, the tragedies happening to teachers, not just in Texas, but all over, going way back to Columbine. And the stories that you hear are stories of tragedy and stories of sadness, and just unbelievable sadness. You know, I just keep thinking about that teacher who had been teaching for 23 years. 23 years, and she was about ready to celebrate not only her 23rd anniversary, but her 23rd wedding anniversary, and she was shot. She was shot and killed. And her husband died, you know, after going to a memorial. He died of heartbreak because they had been together for 25 years. So I don't want to, and we hear about those stories, but you never really hear the stories about the good stuff, not just the good stuff that happens to the students, how the students grow up to become doctors and lawyers and things, but you never hear what it means to be a teacher, you know. And I think the reason why we don't value teachers is because we don't hear those stories, you know. And so that's the story I want to tell. Remember how in Forrest Gump, when Forrest Gump was telling Jenny what his journey, Jenny was on her deathbed, and she sat up and said, you know, what was it like out there? And he told these wonderful stories about being in Vietnam and how when the rain finally stopped and the bullets stopped flying, he could just look up and just see a sky full of stars. I'm gonna try to get through this show without being too emotional, I swear. And he talked about being on the bayou and just being by himself and just seeing the twinkling lights on the water. He talked about how running, and he was talking about how there was places in his journey where the sky, the water was so clear and the sky was so clear, you couldn't tell where the earth ended and heaven began. Because that's what it was like for me, becoming a teacher. When people ask me, and Barbara, go ahead and turn on my screen for me, please. When people ask me where did I begin to make the correlation between being a gemologist and understanding the connection between gemstones and people, what I really began, and I've known it for a long time, but it really began when I was a teacher. These are my gemstones. These are my gemstones. This is West Park Academy. And I wanted to show the individual pictures, but because each gemstone is so profound, I have stories for all of them. Being a teacher was one of the most incredible things that I will ever do in my life, ever. And I could sit here all day long and tell you stories about how horrible it was, how many times I spent time in Dr. Booker's office, the principal's office. I was in the principal's office more times as a teacher than I was as a kid. I was never in the principal's office as a kid. I can tell you stories about kids that cursed me out, parents that cursed me out, how many times I was written up. I could tell you all kinds of that, but that's not my story. That's not the wonderment of what it meant to be a teacher. See, people don't understand what it means to be a teacher. I didn't get into teaching the normal way. I got in really because of I was basically recruited. I had competed in the international speech contest in 2012, and I won, and I went to the world championship, and people started hearing about me, and someone who was connected to President Obama pushed to get more African Americans in the males, especially who taught science and math in the school system. I was recruited, and I remember sitting there watching President Obama's State of the Union address. And I remember sitting there watching the address, and he looked into the screen and said how we needed more African Americans in the school system and everything else. And when he looked in the screen, it was like he was looking directly at me. And I remember saying, who? And he was like, you. I'm talking about you. I'm like, me? Yeah. So I wear this shirt. This shirt was literally a shirt written. This is an original copy. I have two. Done by the same guy who created the Superman comics. Alex Hess. So I was recruited by the commander in chief, and I'm still a Marine. So I was like, okay, and I got into Northwestern University on a scholarship. It was awesome. And I taught at the school called Kwame Nkrumah Academy, which was an Afrocentric. It was like basically bringing Africa to the United States. And I did this, and then I got a chance to work at this school called West Park Academy. West Park Academy was an inner city school. It was an urban school, right in the middle of like the hood. And it had this yellow facade. And maybe I'll show. I was trying to find pictures of it, but I just really want you to hear. And when I came to school, I had an interview with Dr. Joyce Booker, Dr. Joyce Booker Thomas. I always just call her Dr. Booker, but Dr. Joyce Booker Thomas. And I've said this to her many times, and I told her one day I was going to put her on blast on all over the world. So here is my opportunity. Dr. Joyce Booker Thomas was probably one of the greatest leaders, one of the greatest administrators I've ever met in my life. She was the kind of principal that if she told me to teach out in the snow, I mean, I'm talking about snow up to your knee. And she would just say, Mr. Mixon, I want you to go out and teach in the snow. And in your head, you're thinking, this is some bull, man. What? That's craziness. But because Dr. Booker just totally understood the art form of teaching, at least she understood me. I was like, okay. It was like, Dr. Booker is a Jedi Knight. And she would so empower me that I would go out there in the snow, convince the kids to go out there in the snow. Of course, they're like, what are you crazy? This didn't actually happen. This is when she told you something, you knew that it came from God, Jesus, her. And so when she interviewed me for the job, we went upstairs. My room was in room 310. And it was on the third floor. It had an elevator that went right up to my room in a school. I had an elevator that when I walked in the elevator, went up to the third floor, and there was my room. And we walked into the school was beautiful. First of all, it was just clean and you walk into, and she opened up the door to this huge room. Huge. My room was, I don't know, 50 by 18, some craziest number like that. And I walked in, and my room had everything. Remember that story I told you a long time ago about my brother and how my mother, who, of course, my brother was interesting, told us that we wasn't getting sugar honey iced tea for Christmas, and I believed it. And my brother still went on Christmas morning, and he ran down the hallway because I was totally believing I wasn't going to get anything. And he said, Barry, we got everything. That's what it was like. That's what it was like when Dr. Booker took me when she took me in to see my room. And I'm a distinguished Toastmaster. I've spoken all over the world, not at that point, but I had won the international speech contest. And I remember the only thing I could just say is, wow. I had the most beautiful, I didn't have a lab that cool in college. And I went to good colleges, okay? I didn't have a lab that I had microwave, I had a refrigerator, I had goggles, the station, the ultraviolet goggle station. I had all the test tubes, beakers, Erlenmeyer flasks that a scientist could ever want. I had an 80-inch starboard. This is before, things, people were still buying, 42, 45. I had an 80-inch starboard that I was able to control remotely. I bought like a $200, it's up there, maybe I'll show it, a $200 tablet that only connected with that starboard. And I was able to, from the back of the class, teach my class. When you teach in, that was no longer, that was never my classroom. That was my temple. That was my ministry. In Northwestern, you have to write a proposal, or well, most teaching programs, you have to write a proposal about what kind of classroom what you had. And I told them in my proposal that I wanted a classroom where when you walked into the classroom, there was just science everywhere. Everywhere. Yeah, science. I had posters. I'm talking about the expensive posters. $40, $50 posters of Galileo and Einstein and Madame Marie Curie. I had a poster of Neil Armstrong over my heart, and around the walls was all the great scientists: white scientists, black scientists, Hispanic scientists, Asian scientists, men and women, all around. I had 18 bulletin boards in my class, inside and out. I had a whole wall. I didn't do 5 shows, teaching classes today. I did 5 shows a day. Miss Chambers, who's up here. I don't know if you can see my cursors. This is Dr. Booker. Miss Chambers taught me how to put tapestry on my bulletin board so they last longer. So I got out there and got fabric. I got fabric and covered my walls with Star Wars blueprints to all the Star Wars ships. Yeah. I had a poster of the Avengers because science is everywhere. I got this lab coat that says West Park Academy, Fine Arts and Technology. We do science here. And it was magnificent. It was everything that I do today in teaching, and I'll talk about that towards the end, started from there. And this was my class. This was my first graduating 8th grade class. I taught 7th and 8th grade. And I remember when Dr. Booker made me lead science teacher. I thought, I felt like Mr. Spock. You know, walking into a building where on the walls was technology, and I knew that was me. That was it. That was my place. And as a gemologist, when I would walk in, all I would see is a classroom filled with gemstones. And to me, that's the one thing I will say, that the problem with education is we teach kids as if they are all one type of gemstone, like, oh, this whole group are all diamonds. Okay, there's a certain way you handle diamonds. This whole group is emeralds, and all right, fine. Emeralds is a relatively brittle stone. So there's things you do. This is pearls. If this whole room, if this was a picture of pearls, then there would be a certain way that you would treat them because they're pearls, they're organic. But teaching, education system teaches like they're all the same, and they're not. They're not. Every one of them interact with the light differently. That's where I began to understand the concept. I am, as the teacher, I am the light, meaning that I have the not in the God way, the light that comes inside of me, the excitement, the passion that I had inside of me about science. I get to reflect that to the kids, and each one of them. And guys, I know some of my kids I'm calling you kids. I'm sorry, no disrespect. You're grown, I understand, but I'm old. Thank you. So the kids reflected in a different way. And there's so many stories. I'm looking at people, Columba, Columba is right here. That took me such a long time to understand her name. I don't know why. Donnie Cruz, who had a brother, Nicholas Cruz, and Nicholas was, he created a play in class where he not only did he write the screenplay, he wrote the screenplay. He gave each one of his classmates a role in, because the lights had went out in the building. We were sitting there waiting for the lights to come back on, and I was trying to think of something to do. And Nicholas said, "Why don't we write a play?" And I'm like, "A play about what?" He says, "About electricity." And I'm like, "For real?" He said, "Yeah." And he wrote the screenplay. He gave each student their part, and he acted in it. So he even gave me a part. And he was Einstein. And he did this in the classroom right there. It wasn't even a homework. He did it in 2 hours, 2.5 hours. And he had everybody engaged. Those are the moments that I remember. I mean, there's just so many students. I want to talk about one student in particular. I want to talk about Jaquisha Carr. Jaquisha was one of those students, and I'm sorry about the fuzziness of the picture, but Jaquisha was one of those students that people fear. Jaquisha was when you understand stories, you begin to understand that Jaquisha's story was so deep, so she had gone through so much. So Jaquisha came in cursing at me. Jaquisha cursed at me in ways that it was amazing. It was amazing. Jaquisha, I don't even know what the reason was, but I remember Jaquisha cursed at me in so many, it was rapid fire. And at the end of it, and of course the whole class was there, and they was all looking at me because they knew she had me. And maybe because I'm a storyteller, I just looked at her and said, you know how I stopped her? I said, Jaquisha, that was amazing. And she was like, what? I said, the way you put all those curse words together, I spent 14 years in the Marine Corps with the most hardest of hard guys, and I never was cursed out like that before. And she just looked at me. I was just like, I don't even want to repeat the words because I don't think I could say it with the eloquency that you said it with, just the way you said MF and B, and and she just said, Mr. Mixon, you crazy. And I said, I know. See, what I want to tell you is how each student changed me. People don't realize what it means to be a teacher, to be able to take someone's mind, to teach them, to be a science teacher and get them to understand why H2O is the reason why we have life on this planet, because H2O, water, is the only substance in the whole world that can be in 3 states at the same time: solid, liquid, and a gas. And you're the person that teaches that. Being a teacher is the closest thing to becoming immortal. Because the stories that you tell a child, that child who will grow up to be that young adult, and that young adult will become an adult with their own children, the story that they will tell their sons and daughters is the story that you told them, if you tell it well enough. Jaquisha, I don't know. I don't even know if she had so much hate inside of her. She hated everything. So yeah, I got the brunt of it. And I can tell you all kinds of stories, but what I want to tell you about Jaquisha is one time Jaquisha, who was always in trouble, Jaquisha loved basketball. This is the power of stories. When you understand someone's story, Jaquisha loved basketball. And one day she wasn't supposed to go because she was in trouble. And I just was like, you're going. I'll take the hit for this. So she played. And she played against this school where one of the girls on the school was 6'1". I'm talking 7th, 8th grade. She was 6'1", maybe 6'2". She was huge. Not just, she was strong. And Jaquisha didn't care. I saw Jaquisha play, and she manned up on that girl like it was like she didn't care. She was a Jedi Knight on that day. On that day. And the test came, the NWEA, and we had, they always have tests in school, and our school was selected. Dr. Booker had our school selected to do the science part of it, and it was an honor for me to be the test, to be the person testing this thing. And Jaquisha, who historically had gotten low prices, scores like, I don't know, 130, 140. What they wanted was at least 199. For her grade, 212. So Jaquisha was doing her normal thing. I ain't doing it. I ain't taking tests. And I just said, what I would have the students do is like literally be cheerleaders for each other. So they would come up and I would have them declare what they were going to get. So when Jaquisha came up, Jaquisha said, "What are you going to get, Jaquisha?" I did it like it was ESPN. This is how it goes. South. Speaking of sports, today we are with Jaquisha Carr, star of the West Park women's basketball team. Jaquisha, what kind of score are you going to get? And Jaquisha, because her self-esteem, because of all the things she had been going through, and that's why I understood Jaquisha. She was like, I don't know, Mr. Mixon, I don't know, 150. And I was just like, what? And I asked the class, how many of you think that Jaquisha can only get a 150? And none of them raised their hand. I asked the class, I said, how many think, raise your hand if you think that Jaquisha can get a higher score? And they all raised their hand, and I was able to ask them one by, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? And they was like, I think she can get a 220, 225, 230, all kinds of numbers. And I said, Jaquisha, your fans expecting a 20, 25 point game. What are you going to do? And she said, yeah, okay. All right, Mr. Mixon. I think I can get a 220. I was like, yeah, okay. Fast forward to the day before the test. And you could see the cloud. You could see the clouds, the darkness, the antagonist was starting to take over her. And she wasn't even going to come. And she said that, I don't know, Mr. Mixon. I'm not sure if I can do this. And I said, Jaquisha, did you think that when you were manning up on that girl? Did you scare? I know who you are, Jaquisha. Play the test as if you were playing against that girl. It's a game. And we're going to pay some bills because that's a game too. And I'll see you on the other side.
When you do nothing, nothing happens. Best time to take action is now.
This is the time to work on you and your business.
So I've created a group,
An online academy for professionals and entrepreneurs. Power Partners will help you
to start helping yourself.
Helped me change my life and my business.
Not a Toastmasters, it's not a BNI, it's not any of these, but it is. So it's all this stuff in one place.
Get the results that you deserve right now. So what are you waiting for? Let's make it happen.
see you in Power Partners.
All right, we're back. So the test came. And I looked her right in her eye and I said, be a Jedi that I know you could be. I used to grade differently. I didn't use A, B, and C, and D. I used characters because the school's wizard, the school's mascot was the Wizards. We were the home of the Wizards. So I got to be not only a Jedi Knight, but I got to be Gandalf. So when you got an A, you had a stamp with a Yoda's face on it. When you got a B, you had a stamp with Gandalf, a wizard. When you got a C, and the kids said it so wonderfully, when you got a C, you got a stamp with a stormtrooper on it. And when the kids asked me, why is the stormtrooper C? I didn't really know what to say. One of the kids said, because nobody cares about a stormtrooper. They die in the sky. I said, ooh, I like that. When you got a D, you had a picture of Gandalf with his staff. And you remember that scene in The Hobbit where he's facing against this demon, the Bagroff, and he said, "You shall not pass." And he said that's what it meant to get a D in my class. And to get an F, you got a Darth Vader stamp. And I told kids that an F in my class wasn't a bad grade. It was a decision. Because, see, when you understand Star Wars and understand the story of Star Wars, Darth Vader was the greatest Jedi. He was predicted. He was prophesied to be the greatest. Darth Vader chose the dark side of the Force. He chose it. And I told all my students, if you get an F in my class, that's because it's not because you're not smart. You chose to be that. And I would put all their grades, A, B, C, D, F, on the thing. And they were like, why are you putting the F on? I said, because you obviously are proud of it. So what? If you're proud of it, I'm proud of it. So Jaquisha took the test. And she came back and she looked at me after the test was over. And she said, Mr. Mixon. I said, what happened, Jaquisha? What happened? Because I knew there's no way. The story I told her, there's no way it didn't hit her. She said, this Jaquisha. She said, Mr. Mixon, I got a 244. The smile on her face was spectacular. And I told her, I said, you know me, I told her, okay, go downstairs to Dr. Booker and act like, because Jaquisha was always in the principal's office, act like you had your normal argument with me, that you couldn't stand me and everything else, and then tell her score. Yeah. And she did that. She went downstairs, Dr. Booker, I messed up, whatever. And Dr. Booker, and always seeing Jaquisha, said, yeah, what happened? And she told her what happened, that she got a 244. That's what teaching is about. Jaquisha's no longer with us. Jaquisha died a few years ago. I heard she died in her sleep. She died. There's so many stories. I think about Benjamin Soto down here at the bottom. Benjamin Soto was a kind of a heavy set kid and low self-esteem, but he was so brilliant, and you can see it in his answers. And one day I walked up to him and I said, you know what? I said, look in your shirt. And he looked in the shirt. I said, what do you see? He says, it's just a white shirt, not just his t-shirt. And I'm just like, look again. He said, what do you see? And he said, what? I said, that's all you see? He said, what do you see? I said, I see a S. I see a bat. I see a symbol. I see a lightning bolt. Whatever you decided your symbol, because you're a superhero, Benjamin, you're a superhero. You play like you Clark Kent. But I know from your answers, from that last answer, there's nobody in this room knew that answer but you. So stop playing like you just ordinary. You're not. You're not. And he never got anything lower than a B+ in my class. When you're a teacher, you get to tell stories all the time. All the time. Taina. Taina. I'm going to say it the exact way I told Dr. Booker. Taina was a natural disaster. Taina was all the forces of nature, hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, earthquakes, all of them, all the ones that Taina, woo, man. And Taina, over time, telling her stories, motivating her, making her understand the value of who she was. Taina was an artist, and I didn't realize that. And one day I was at the school. Taina had, I don't know, she left the school. She had already graduated. And I was upstairs, and they called me down to the office. Mr. Mixon, can you come down to the office? I'm thinking, oh, God, here we go again. What'd I do this time? And I came down the stairs, and there was Taina. I was like, oh, my God. What? Like, you're back? And she sits there and tells me, Mr. Mixon, I just want to thank you. I want to thank you for never giving up on me. There's so many things that I do now, Mr. Mixon, because you made me believe in all that corny stuff that you had on the wall. You made me believe. I cried all the way home in traffic. I'm just bawling. Those are the stories you don't hear. Jody L., Sakari, who's still on Facebook. Hey, Sakari, how just so many. Cody, oh my God, just so many children that just touched your soul. Just Nike on, who's still here. Nike on, who's on my Facebook page. Just Miari, just so many. Christian and Jasmine, just Tonise. Tonise was one day I was teaching, and Tonise in the middle of my class started running around the class. I have no idea why. She ran, literally, it was like she was running so fast. You know how you go to one of those Holy Ghost kind of churches and people get to feel the Holy Spirit and start running around? That's what she was doing. And in the middle of the class, like I don't know, 1:30 in the afternoon. And to the point where she was running around so fast, I wish I had a stopwatch, because I was like, I should be timing this. And she graduated with high honors. Those are the stories that you don't get a chance to hear. Jody L, whose picture, Jody L Rosario. Jody L was one of these handsome Hispanic kids. Yeah, and Jody L knew he was all of that. He did. He played soccer. And from the very first day, he told me, he said, Mr. Mixon, I don't even believe in science. I was just like, okay. And he says, because I had all the posters, and he said, all these guys, I don't even believe in. Einstein. I said, really? He said, yeah. I said, okay. And I said, no problem. And then maybe 2-3 days later, I said, Jody L, let me ask you a question. What do you like? He said, I like soccer, Mr. Mixon. I said, okay, I'm going to be a famous soccer star, and I'm going to have $1 million contract, all this other stuff. I said, okay. And he said, I told you I don't believe in science. I said, Jody L, I already got you. He says, what do you mean? I said, you'll see. Jody L used to practice outside. We had a beautiful campus, the yard and everything else and stuff. And he would practice every day. Like, I'd get to school early. I loved my job. I loved teaching. My classroom was better than my condo. It was just beautiful. So I came sometimes an hour early. And Jody L would be out there practicing. And rain, snow, it didn't make a difference. He was practicing. And one day I walked up to her and I said, Jody L, I could do that. Of course, I'm 1,000 years old to teachers, to kids. So he looked at me like I was gum on the bottom of his shoe. Like, Mr. Mixon, you can't. And then he started telling me what it takes to kick that ball with that English. And I said, oh, wait a minute. You're talking about physics, right? But, I know you don't believe in that. I'm sorry. I cursed at you. I'm sorry. Please don't tell your mother. And then later on, a few months later, he had these $250. Don't ask me why. Poor kid had $250 Nike shoes. But he had the latest, the same shoe that, Ronaldo wore. And he's out there, and all the kids are standing around him looking at his shoes. And he's like, look at me, Mr. Mixon, look at me, look at these shoes. I was just like, man, you wasted all that money. Once he told me how much, you wasted all that money. I said, you could have bought some flip-flops. He said, Mr. Mixon, I thought you were smart. I mean, Mr. Mixon, really? How am I supposed to play? How am I supposed to get a grip on the grass? How am I supposed to be able to turn? I said, ooh, you mean you're talking about kinesiology, movement? You're talking about friction? You can't be talking about adhesive forces because you don't believe in science. And the greatest moment that I will remember with Jody L. And Jody L didn't do anything in my class. Jody L just usually have a hood over his head and sit in the back of class. Teachers, those of you teachers, that kid that you're just so happy that he's just quiet. It's like you should worry about him, but it's like you can't because you got 28 other kids and you just thank God he's one of the quiet. He's disruptive, but he's just quiet that day. And we were talking about the periodic table. And each day I gave them an assignment. They had to not just know the experiment, they had to know the scientist. It was called Know Your Scientist. Kind of like discover their story. And Jody L, I had given him Demetrius Mendeleev. Demetrius Mendeleev was the person who created the periodic table. Because I thought when I knew who Mendeleev's life was, he was arrogant. That's why he never won a Nobel Prize. He was extremely arrogant. And I thought that Jody L could get something out of that. But he said he wasn't going to do it. And I said, okay, Jody L, you're going to fail this. You need to do this. we was teaching. I was teaching the periodic table, and Jodiel from nowhere raised his hand, and I'm like, it was like the light came on in the room. I was like, what? Jodiel wants to say something, and he literally started talking about Mendeleev, and then he went back down in his hood, and I was like, wow. And then I was still talking about it, and he raised his hand again. I'm like, twice. Now, Jodiel didn't raise his hand for the whole entire year. And he did then. And he says, that's not what Mendeleev did. He says, it's more than that. And he came up to the front of the class and gave a whole monologue on Dmitris Mendeleev. This is the kid that said he wasn't going to do anything. He didn't even believe in science, but he got the story of Mendeleev and knew it so well that he was able to teach it. And the kids were sitting there like, oh my God. That's what teaching does. That's what we lost. The teachers who dedicated their lives to changing people's lives. That's what we lost. That's what we need to understand, what it means to become a teacher. I work with diamonds, rubies, emeralds, sapphires, pearls all the time, but the gemstones that you see in front of you are the greatest gemstones I've ever worked with. Ever. So, I mean, it just, it's amazing. Natasha, Moses, Caesar here. Caesar was one of those angry kind of kids. You know, Caesar was pissed at everything, you know, and like a lot of young boys. And Caesar wasn't he was just defiant, just to be defiant. And I was teaching them muscles, the different muscle groups of the upper body. And I wanted them to understand what that muscle group did. So I had them do push-ups. And Caesar was like, I ain't doing only 10. I ain't doing. My classroom again was, we put the room to the side. I had a gym. It was amazing. And Caesar didn't want to do anything. I'm not doing that. This is BS. I said, okay. And people were doing, and he was starting to get to me, and still was going to therapy. He was starting to get to me because he was just so defiant. And then I said, anybody else? And this kid here, this young man, Alfredo Soto, not his Benjamin, Alfredo in the corner. Alfredo had some kind of condition. I don't know. I think it was Augsburg or something. I never cared. To me, when your classroom, every gemstone had its own characteristics. So I never listened to the IEPs and all this other stuff. You were who you were. In fact, Alberto Soto, I never called him Alfredo. I never called him Alfredo. He was always Mr. Soto to me because Mr. Soto was Spock. He was Spock, young Spock. And out of nowhere, out of all the people that wanted to do push-ups and stuff, and Caesar sitting there telling me, I'm not doing it. Alberto, Mr. Soto, Alfredo, his name is. I call him Mr. Soto all the time. Sorry. He raised his hand. And Mr. Soto was like, he was waif thin. He was just thin. He didn't talk hardly at all. He moved like a snake. His whole everything was slow motion. He raised his hand. And I'm thinking to myself, what's he gonna do? I was asking for 10 push-ups. He didn't look like he could do half. He got there on the floor and in front of the whole class, and we was counting them out loud. And with Mr. Soto was like 2, 5, 10, 15, 21, 27, 30, 35. I'm sitting there. The whole class is sitting there just in absolute amazement. Absolute amazement. Caesar, like his jaw was on the ground. And he got up to 43, 48, 49, 50. Mr. Soto did 50, and I'm not talking about little stupid kid push-ups. I'm talking about Marine Corps hoorah kind of push-ups. 50. He stood up, he brushed himself off, and went right back to his seat. I don't even know if he was breathing hard. And I told Caesar, That's what you can do when you understand who you are and what you are inside. And the people who doubt you in your life won't even see you won't even see a Mr. Soto coming. He's like an assassin. That's the guy that you're going to lose your job to. That's the guy that if you don't understand, or the woman, because there was girls in my class that was awesome. Isis, Kenya, Denisha, who was, just so many, all these girls, awesome. I was in a classroom filled with rough gemstones, and the beauty of it was that none of them really understood their power. And my job as a teacher, as a gemologist, was to able to literally identify what your gemstone was and to be able to begin to get them to understand the properties. That's where all this comes from. That's what gem hunter stories come from. It's about understanding what is your skill, what is your talent. So if you are a teacher, you have the opportunity to people say, you have the opportunity to change people's lives. No, it's more than that. It's more than that. You get a chance to create a symphony in someone that they will remember forever. Most of my kids, a lot of them are still on Facebook. Hi. A lot of them have done great things. Caesar had some scholarship to go to MIT. Jody L, when I met him years later, I was on a bus stop and I saw Jody L, and I said, Jody L, how's the soccer coming? He said, oh, Mr. Mixon, I don't even play that no more. What? Like, soccer was breathing for him. I said, what do you mean? I got in some program where I'm writing computer programs with a joint program project with MIT. I cried. I remember tears welling up in my head because this was the kid that told me that he didn't want to have anything to do with science. And here he is walking to MIT. And those of you who don't understand MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, if you're a scientist, that's the holy place. That's when you saw MIT, you hear, oh, that's what it's like. So as we mourn the teachers we've lost, mourn for them and understand what we lost, but also think about the teachers that are still here. My brothers and sisters that are still here. I still teach. I teach and this is my first official public announcement. I'm going to be doing more information. I have a company which I call Professor Barry's Science Emporium, where everything is science. And I'm going to create a room. I'm going to create a 310, my own personal 310, my own church of science and math and history. Because when you're a teacher, you have the awesome responsibility to not just to know how to take a test, but to how to see the world in a different place, in a different way. You get to truly change the world. And because of COVID, because of everything else, because I began to understand my gifts, my talents. I literally teach in 5 different continents, teaching kids that age, middle school kids, because they still believe in once upon a time. And what I ask all of you to do on this show each week is to understand what your value is. Understand the value of the people that we've lost. Take them before the school is over for a lot of school systems, but the next year, or take the time to thank your teacher. Think about your teacher, the teachers that you had, how much those people changed your life. And I just wanted to take a day to talk about everything that I say each week on this show about the characteristics that you see in gemstones, or the characteristics that you see in jewelry and the history of it. Everybody that I ever speak about on this show had a teacher, had someone to inspire them, someone who touched their hearts. Alana, who told me, beautiful young lady, told me in 7th grade, Mr. Mixon, I don't want to go to school anymore. I'm done. What do you mean you're done? What do you mean you're done? This is 7th grade, girl. You got more to do. I found out that she's a research scientist somewhere. She's a research scientist. I mean, it's just Willianis, Jacqueline, Lewis, all these people. I mean, Biani, just so many, Jasmine, Cody. Cody just swore he was just Einstein personified. So to be able to get him to understand that you can't just talk about it, you got to be about it. You can't tell me that you all that and get a 70 on a test or less. You got to do it. If you're going to be a Jedi, this is what you have to do. And even though it might be corny to some people, it worked. If I was to die today, my last thoughts would be these kids. That what I was able to do as a teacher. And people, people say, well, we're a teacher educator. I had a discussion with someone, Nina, last night about it, Professor Thomas. And I don't get into all the acronyms and all this other kind of stuff. All I know was that for 3 years, I got a chance to tell stories. For 3 years, I got a chance to see children grow into young men and young women, and in their own way change the world. For 3 years, thank you to Dr. Booker. Thank you for Miss Chambers, who taught me how to set up my board. Thank you for Mr. Schenkelberg, the white guy in the school. Thank you for allowing me to see how to teach history in a different way, because that's what I do now to kids all over the world. This is what it means to be a teacher. So this show is about value, and I didn't want to miss the opportunity to tell the value of what it means to be a teacher. Thank you, Miss Brown, Maya Brown, who for thinking that I was an excellent teacher, because Miss Brown was one of those moms that she didn't play. She didn't play. She knew exactly what her child was supposed to do, and she had expectations of me as a teacher to bring that to her child. For all these years that have passed since I was a teacher of her child, for her to say that I was an excellent teacher, that's what you remember. That's what I think about when I think about being a teacher. That's what I think about each time while I'm in China or in India or in Africa or teaching kids in France. Take the time. Take the time to begin to think and hold teachers to the level of esteem that they need to hold. All of us know that there's no profession that you can ever get to without going through a school, but we don't ever think about the teachers that do it. I left because I knew that I didn't want the music to die. I didn't want to be so inundated with just the struggles and the heartaches and the pain and all the other things. So I give homage and total respect for those men and women, my brothers and sisters, who stayed in the fight in that way. My company is, to me, the possibilities of what teaching can be. I teach on Zoom and I get kids to see what science is about, what history is about. And I get them to see it in the same way that I learned how to do it, working at West Park Academy. I got to be a wizard every single day, a Jedi wizard, teaching people truly the powers of the Force. So thank you. I hope you enjoyed today. Please leave comments. Any of my students, I would love to have you on this show in the future. Tell me about a gemstone. Next week, we will be talking about Queen Elizabeth, Mary, Queen of Scots, and the pearl that changed the history of mankind. But until then, again, my name is Barry Mixon, and I am a gemological storyteller, and I wish you to take the time to discover the value of your story. So until next week, au revoir, atatella, bye-bye.